D4vd and his Tesla vanished without a trace, leaving only questions, fear, and a trail of chilling clues that would baffle investigators and terrify everyone who knew him. The case began on an ordinary spring evening, the kind that seemed calm and routine, but would soon become unforgettable for everyone who knew D4vd. He was 28, a young man with a fascination for technology and a personality that drew people in. His friends often joked that he was always chasing the next big idea, tinkering with gadgets, and exploring innovations that most people didn't even understand. That night, he left his downtown apartment to meet a friend, dressed casually but carrying a backpack filled with the latest devices he had been working on. No one suspected that it would be the last time anyone would see him alive. D4vd's absence didn't immediately raise alarms. He had a history of staying out late, attending tech meetups, and sometimes disappearing for hours while working on his projects. But as the hours turned into a full day without contact, a growing unease began to settle among his family and friends. His phone went straight to voicemail, and even repeated calls went unanswered. D4vd was normally quick to respond, especially when someone reached out with concern. The fact that he didn't reply felt strange and out of character, like a puzzle piece was missing in a familiar picture. Neighbors began to notice the unusual silence. The hum of his Tesla, which usually sat parked outside his apartment with its battery quietly charging, was gone. The sleek car, a symbol of both his success and his love for technology, was nowhere to be found. Police were called and a missing person report was filed, but initially the investigation seemed to hit a wall. There were no signs of struggle in his apartment, nothing broken, nothing stolen, nothing to suggest a forced entry. His personal belongings were untouched, and his laptop, filled with ongoing projects and personal files, sat open on the desk as if he had simply stepped out for a moment. Investigators started retracing D4vd's last known movements. Security footage from nearby streets showed him leaving his building, walking calmly toward the nearest bus stop, carrying his backpack. There were no suspicious figures following him, no indications that he had been coerced or confronted on the street. Digital traces were equally puzzling. His phone records showed no unusual activity after he left the apartment, no messages hinting at fear or trouble. Even his online accounts remained untouched, leaving police without leads. Friends began to search for clues themselves, checking the places he frequented: coffee shops, co-working spaces, tech stores. They asked anyone who might have seen him, but answers were scarce. One by one, they were forced to confront a chilling reality: D4vd had vanished without a trace. Social media posts hoping for his safe return flooded in, but each day that passed only deepened the worrying and confusion. The combination of his sudden disappearance, the absence of his Tesla, and the lack of any digital footprint left everyone questioning what could have happened in those crucial hours. What had started as a simple night out had become the beginning of a mystery that would grip the city, leaving loved ones desperate for answers they could not yet understand. 3 days after D4vd disappeared, the city was gripped by a shocking revelation that turned fear into horror. A construction crew working on a new development near the outskirts of town made a discovery that no one could have anticipated. While clearing debris near a wooded area, they stumbled upon several large boxes stacked awkwardly and partially hidden by underbrush. At first, the workers assumed the boxes contained discarded materials or trash, but a strange odor and the unnatural stiffness of their contents prompted them to call the authorities immediately. Police arrived quickly, cordoning off the area and bringing in forensic experts. As the investigation unfolded, the grim reality became undeniable. The boxes contained human remains, dismembered and carefully packaged in a manner that suggested someone had gone to considerable lengths to conceal them. Forensic teams worked meticulously, identifying every piece and reconstructing the evidence to determine both the identity of the victim and the circumstances surrounding the death. Fingerprints and DNA confirmed what everyone feared: D4vd was dead. The revelation sent shockwaves through the city. Friends and family were confronted with a reality too cruel to accept. The young man who had been vibrant, intelligent, and full of life was gone, and the circumstances of his death were violent and deliberate. Investigators carefully examined the scene, noting that while the boxes were hidden in the woods, there were no obvious signs of a struggle nearby. This raised troubling questions. Had D4vd been killed elsewhere and transported here, or had someone lured him to this secluded location? The deliberate nature of the packaging suggested planning, a cold precision that only deepened the mystery. As news of the discovery spread, the media swarmed the area, capturing images of police tape and investigators moving cautiously through the trees. The story quickly dominated headlines, but details were scarce, leaving the public to grapple with fragments of information and wild speculation. Friends and acquaintances shared memories of D4vd online, his quirky inventions, his late-night coding sessions, his infectious curiosity about the world. They struggled to reconcile the familiar image of a lively, bright young man with the horrifying reality of the crime. Authorities began piecing together the timeline leading up to the discovery. They revisited surveillance footage from surrounding areas, spoke with anyone who had seen D4vd in the days before his disappearance, and examined his digital footprint. Despite these efforts, the investigation was complicated by the absence of clear motives or suspects. D4vd had not been known to carry large sums of money, and there were no apparent disputes that could have led to such an extreme act. The lack of immediate leads created a tense atmosphere, both within the police department and among D4vd's circle of loved ones, who demanded answers that were not yet forthcoming. In the midst of the investigation, forensic experts began analyzing subtle details in the packaging and the state of the remains. Every cut, every mark, every trace of material was scrutinized for clues. Was this a crime of passion or one carried out with calculated intent? Was the motive personal, financial, or something even more complex? While the answers remained elusive, one thing was clear: D4vd's disappearance was not random, and the carefully orchestrated concealment of his body suggested a perpetrator who was meticulous, methodical, and possibly familiar with him. The chilling discovery in the woods marked the grim turning point in the case, leaving the city in shock, and loved ones desperate for answers that would take weeks and eventually months to begin to emerge. The investigation took a startling turn when authorities discovered D4vd's missing Tesla abandoned in a remote industrial lot on the edge of the city. The sleek vehicle, which had vanished along with him, was found completely intact, parked in an empty corner of the lot as if it had been left deliberately. There were no signs of forced entry, no damage to the car, and remarkably, no fingerprints other than D4vd's. The discovery baffled investigators. The car's presence raised more questions than answers. How could the vehicle appear in a deserted lot, untouched, while its owner had vanished so violently? The contrast between the car's pristine condition and the brutality of D4vd's death deepened the sense of mystery surrounding the case. Police immediately began analyzing the Tesla for clues. They scanned its onboard computer systems, looking for GPS data, security logs, and any trace of recent activity. The results were troubling. The GPS system had been wiped clean, erasing any record of the car's movements in the hours surrounding D4vd's disappearance. It was as though someone had anticipated the investigation and deliberately removed all evidence of where the vehicle had been. Forensic teams checked for fingerprints, fibers, and other trace materials, but beyond a few smudges that could not be traced, the car offered no immediate leads. The level of precision suggested that whoever was involved had a deep understanding of both technology and criminal procedure. Security camera footage from nearby buildings added another layer of intrigue. Late at night, a figure was captured moving around the lot near the Tesla. The images were blurry, but certain details stood out. The person seemed aware of the cameras, deliberately staying in shadows, avoiding direct sight lines. Investigators speculated that this was no random passerby. It appeared to be someone with a plan, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The footage, however, was inconclusive. No face could be identified, and no other identifying markers were visible. The mysterious figure vanished as suddenly as they appeared, leaving only a sense of foreboding behind. Experts in digital forensics were brought in to probe deeper. They examined the Tesla's internal systems, looking for hidden logs, recent charging activity, and connected devices. It became clear that the car's disappearance and reappearance were not coincidental. D4vd's phone, which had been missing along with him, was also untraceable. Every technological trail had been erased or manipulated, hinting at a perpetrator who not only planned the crime carefully but also understood the digital landscape intimately. The deliberate erasure of data suggested a calculated attempt to delay the investigation and obscure the truth. As the investigation unfolded, detectives began to consider all possibilities. Was the Tesla abandoned to mislead authorities, or was it part of a larger scheme designed to hide D4vd's final movements? Could the vehicle hold clues that were invisible at first glance, messages left in code, hidden files, or patterns only visible to someone with technical expertise? The presence of the car became a symbol of the puzzle that authorities faced. It was an ordinary object turned extraordinary by its role in the mystery, a reminder that every detail in the case had meaning and every lead had to be pursued. The abandoned Tesla transformed the investigation from a simple disappearance into a complex hunt for answers, one that would challenge investigators at every turn and keep the city questioning what had really happened to D4vd in the final hours of his life. As the investigation into D4vd's disappearance and murder deepened, detectives began uncovering connections that had previously gone unnoticed, and the case grew more complex by the day. Among the first discoveries was D4vd's recent involvement in an online tech forum, a private space where enthusiasts shared ideas about advanced robotics, artificial intelligence, and experimental technologies. At first glance, it seemed innocent enough, a community of like-minded individuals exchanging information. But as investigators examined posts, private messages, and interactions, patterns began to emerge that raised concerns. Certain members of the forum had engaged in conversations that suggested jealousy, rivalry, and even obsession over D4vd's work. The police learned that D4vd had trusted several people from this forum with access to his latest projects. Some had visited his apartment under the guise of collaboration, while others had sent him components and instructions for experiments he had yet to complete. Investigators began looking into these contacts carefully, comparing timelines, communication logs, and financial records. It became clear that not everyone in D4vd's circle was entirely trustworthy. Some names appeared repeatedly in connection with unexplained events, missing equipment, unusual financial transactions, and even the sudden disappearance of minor items from his workspace. Financial records offered another layer of intrigue. Small, irregular transfers had been made from D4vd's accounts to offshore entities that he had never discussed with friends or family. The amounts were modest, almost subtle, but they hinted at secret dealings or hidden agendas. Detectives speculated that these transactions could be tied to his online collaborations, possibly payments for components, services, or even bribes. The pattern suggested that someone might have been using D4vd's work for personal gain, or that he had become involved in something far riskier than anyone realized. Investigators also explored the personal connections in D4vd's life. Friends, acquaintances, and colleagues were questioned repeatedly. Many described him as brilliant but occasionally secretive, protective of his projects, and careful about whom he trusted. This secrecy may have been necessary for his work, but it also made it difficult to identify potential threats. Authorities found that while D4vd had a wide social network, the people closest to him had differing accounts of his activities, further complicating the investigation. Some described minor arguments over intellectual property, while others mentioned heated debate over ethical concerns in his experiments. These details suggested that tensions, even if subtle, could have escalated into something far more dangerous. The digital footprint of D4vd's final days became a critical focus. Investigators mapped out emails, messages, and forum interactions, noting anyone who had contact with him shortly before his disappearance. One discovery was particularly alarming: an anonymous account that had been actively monitoring his communications and posting cryptic warnings. The posts were vague but carried an unmistakable tone of threat. Combined with the forensic evidence and financial anomalies, the pattern suggested a planned, premeditated act. Every clue, from the online forum to the mysterious financial transfers, painted a picture of a life entangled in hidden connections, obsessive rivals, and unspoken risks. The deeper detectives dug, the more it became clear that the circumstances surrounding D4vd's death were not random. His professional ambitions, his digital interactions, and the people he trusted all intersected in ways that led to a violent and meticulously orchestrated outcome, leaving authorities with a complex web of motives, suspects, and unanswered questions. Just when the case seemed to reach a point of grim understanding, another twist sent shockwaves through the investigation. Forensic experts analyzing D4vd's remains discovered traces of unusual chemicals, substances that were not typically found in domestic settings. These chemicals were often associated with high-tech laboratories and experimental projects, the kind of materials D4vd had access to through his online collaborations and personal experiments. The presence of these substances suggested that his death might be linked to his work, raising unsettling questions about whether the crime was motivated by professional rivalry, intellectual theft, or a darker obsession with his experiments. Detectives began retracing D4vd's final hours with renewed focus. They re-examined security footage from neighborhoods surrounding his apartment and the industrial lot where his Tesla was found. It was during this review that a new piece of evidence emerged. Footage from a small convenience store across the street from his building showed a figure moving near D4vd's apartment around the time of his disappearance. The individual appeared ordinary at first glance, blending in with the night, but closer analysis revealed subtle behaviors that suggested forethought and intention. This person had previously been considered a bystander, but the footage cast doubt on that assumption. Investigators expanded their inquiries, attempting to identify the figure and uncover any connection to D4vd's digital and personal life. As leads accumulated, the case revealed a disturbing interplay of calculated planning and secrecy. The careful handling of the body, the erased Tesla data, and the hidden financial transactions all pointed to a perpetrator who was not only familiar with D4vd but also skilled in covering tracks. Investigators considered the possibility that the murder had been staged to suggest a link to D4vd's experiments, potentially as a diversion or a warning. Every piece of evidence seemed deliberate, each action measured and precise, leaving detectives to wonder if they were chasing a single individual or a coordinated effort. The public remained captivated by the case. Media coverage intensified, with news outlets dissecting every discovery and social media platforms filled with speculation. Friends and family struggled with the uncertainty, torn between grief and the desire for closure. While arrests were made in connection to people of interest from D4vd's online and professional circles, none of the leads fully explained the chain of events leading to his death. Motives ranged from jealousy to financial gain to personal obsession, but the full picture remained incomplete, a puzzle with crucial pieces missing. The investigation culminated in a chilling realization: despite arrests, forensic breakthroughs, and digital tracking, the total story of D4vd's final hours was still shrouded in mystery. The intricate planning, technological manipulation, and hidden connections suggested a level of sophistication that left authorities cautious and the public uneasy. Even as law enforcement continued to pursue every lead, the case highlighted the limits of understanding in the face of meticulously executed crimes. D4vd's life, marked by curiosity, innovation, and ambition, ended violently, leaving behind a labyrinth of unanswered questions. The city, the loved ones, and the investigators were left to confront a haunting truth. Sometimes even the most determined search for answers reveals only fragments, and some mysteries resist being solved, lingering in shadows long after the headlines fade.